Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series here on Apex Racing TV. It may now be 2024 on the calendar year, but we're still in the third season of this series, and what a season has been thus far. My name is Ron Mullins. Alongside me in the virtual commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall, we have our old bud Josh Wilkie working all the cameras there. And now, after a quick little break for the holidays, we're back and ready to close off the first half of this season with the same action we come to expect from this series. Now tonight, we're racing at very much an unknown quantity of a combination. I mean, who drives GT3 cars around the Daytona road course? I mean, who does that? I'm kidding, obviously. This is without a doubt one of the most storied combinations in all of global motorsports, let alone sim racing, period. All of these drivers definitely have plenty of experience driving these cars at this track, so to pass this off to my buddy Charles joining me in the comms box, do you think that the high amount of experience that all these drivers have is going to create close racing full of drivers pushing it to the just absolute edge of grip every corner, or do you think this race is going to be distant where a lot of drivers are firmly in their place all night?
No, I think that this is because, not just the fact that we drive this so much. I mean, the GT3s were just here last week in the iRacing officials. So, all the drivers should have had plenty of practice. And yeah, we do this race every year, the 24-hour race. Just is, is the first special event of the year. It's one of the most prestigious races in iRacing, as well as in real life. And it's everybody's going to be very well knowledged on their car on this track. So I expect to be really good racing. I think that you'll see I don't think we'll see just breakaways tonight. I think you'll see the pack stay a little bit tighter. Obviously, at some point the faster drivers are going to get their way to the front, but I think it should make for some even better battles on track because as opposed to the last race with CTMP. This is not the most difficult track in the world for the road course. There's a couple of trouble spots, obviously, that we'll see. Turn 1 and the Le Mans chicane, formerly known as the bus stop. And those are the real two high points and or the real trouble areas. But other than that, it's a pretty straightforward race track. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be a fun race. It should be some really good battles on track. It'll be an interesting hour here.
I think it is going to be very interesting. And you mentioned there how we might not see any breakaway packs. One of the drivers throughout this entire series that we've covered here on Apex Racing TV, whether it be this season or whether it be season 2, is Gregory Hovison, who's currently P3 in the timing order right now. But you can see he got a fantastic slipstream there and moves up to the pole right now at a 144.8, just barely ahead of Staropoli in P2 there, running in the Porsche. So Kyle Domark, his teammate for Delta Sport, a little bit of gamesmanship between these two drivers, just trying to help each other get that slipstream and trying to lock out the front row for the Delta Sport teams. That's some great gamesmanship from him there. So Gregory Hovison, right as I was going to say that, he's a little bit on the back foot compared to what we usually expect. He jumps up to the pole in the late stages of the race, late stages of the qualifying, I should say, with about a 1-minute 44-second lap time. These drivers are definitely starting their final laps this time by, so it's now crunch time here in this qualifying session.
Yeah, you could call it gamesmanship, or we could just say teamwork makes the dream work, right? So you get the nice slipstream from your teammate down the front straight around the NASCAR Trail. Set the pole time, still only 300ths of a second ahead of Staropoli, and then another a total of 1300ths of a second ahead of his teammate Domark. So it seems like we might have a little bit spicier battle up front tonight. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. I mean, even Luther is only another 10th back in P4.
Unfortunately, I don't think Staropoli will be able to break Gregory Hovison's command on that pole position time right now, and I think he might possibly lose out on the other pole here in a few moments' time, because we're following Kyle Domar coming around the final corner on this track, the final NASCAR bend going into the tri-oval now. You can see he's getting that slow. Actually, no, they're coming into the pits here. Maybe a little bit of practice for the pit stops that these drivers have to negotiate with around the halfway mark of this race. I was expecting Domark to stay out there and try and set a lap time, but I guess it wasn't looking good for him. I was expecting him to move up over Staropoli and try and lock out that front row for Delta Sport, but doesn't look that way. It's definitely not going to be an improvement from Staropoli, who we saw at the start of his lap have no slipstream help whatsoever. So the slipstream help at this track is going to be really important in this qualifying session. It certainly helped out Gregory Hovison, who before then was fairly slow. As you can see, some interesting interpretation of track limits there from Spencer Retzma, but that was probably the most vulnerable that we've seen Gregory Hovison so far this season and so far in the S1 Series' time here on Apex Racing TV. It's a good thing that he grabbed the pole for his sakes, but that's still not a very comfortable gap between himself and Staropoli.
Oh, no, it's definitely not. And I think actually, if you kind of think about the fact that they were working together for Hovison to set that pole position lap, he's going to have his teammate right behind him at the start of the race, and that might be better than him starting on the outside. So now you've got a teammate behind you that can push you down into turn one, and then kind of be rear guard until you get back up on the straightaway, and then see if you can break away.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. As we see, I think that was Staropoli running on the other apron there, coming to the start-finish straightaway. I don't think that time will be allowed. I'll take a look at my live timing screen to see what kind of lap time he set that time by. Yeah, about 2 seconds off, just because he didn't have that slipstream effect. That shows you how powerful it is. We're coming off the back of the Ray Esports broadcast that we did here on Apex last night, where the slipstream was a massive determining factor at the end of those two races, and I think that'll definitely be the case here. We have 45 minutes ahead of us, but before that, we have to take a look at our starting grid, which we might get here in a few moments' time. Just some of these drivers are still in this qualifying session. The checkered flag has already been out for a few moments, but we might get our starting grid here soon. But once again, it's going to be another familiar name up towards the top. Gregory Hovison, your Series 2 champion from the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series, and right now he's doing pretty good in this championship so far. He's won the first two races at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park and Hockenheim 2 weeks ago at the end of 2023. I'll take a look at my notes here real quick. He is sitting at the top of the standings at 70 points, so he's about 23 clear of Justin Hall in P2 in the championship standings. And taking a look, he's actually, Justin Hall's in P7, so that's not a very good qualifying result there from the driver currently P2 in the championship standings.
Yeah, but P7 here is not terrible. I think really just as long as you can clear any cars that may be a little slower than you in front, mid pack won't be too bad. Obviously, you got the race start that we'll have to worry about. But it's get through that and get in the straight line. Get in your line and yeah, just start working your way up. So.
Yeah, that start is going to be incredibly important. That change in banking, you're going off the high banks of the tri-oval and going into the infield. We'll see if anyone doings the inside of the barrier there at the pit exit. We'll see what happens in this race. So it's Gregory Hovesen starting where he usually does in these races at the front at a 144.8. Not very long, not very far behind him is Eric Staropoli, a name that I don't recognize from this series. So if this is his series debut here from the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series, what a way to do it, to start this race on the front row. That's going to be Hovesen's teammate Kyle Domark starting right behind him. The Delta Sport drivers starting P1 and P3, about a tenth of a second separating those two. And that's Jake Luther starting this race in P4, a very good driver there who we recognize running in the Ferraris a lot throughout this series. He will be starting in the number 19 Ferrari here in P4. And that's Justin Dive Bomber Barrera, another driver in the championship fight, really just fighting for that second with Justin Hall, another Justin there, so he will be starting this race in P5. That's Spencer Retzma splitting the two as he'll be starting in P6 with Justin Hall starting this race in P7. Series founder Simon Admiral will be starting this race in P8. Sammy Hendricks will be in 9th, and Bradley Elvis will round out your top 10.
Yeah, P11, we've got Sintendra Dinza, and I'm not sure I got his name right. I'm sorry about that. Matthew Perrin in P12. Moving on here, we've got Mitch Buenaventura in P13, Chris Cusano in 14th, and Shane Brown rounding out the field in P15.
A somewhat shorter field. I was expecting that we were going to have a little bit more of a bigger field here, but I'm sure a lot of these drivers that are racing in tonight's race are definitely going to be valuing the experience of having a little bit of practice at this combination, just a bit more practice before the Roar starts here in a few days' time, and then we get things kicked off with the iRacing Daytona 24, which, if I'm not mistaken, it's not coming up this upcoming weekend. It's coming up the weekend after, the weekend right before the actual Daytona 24. But we've got some nice, juicy action ahead of us. We have a pit stop to contend with. We have 15 drivers on the starting grid and 45 minutes of racing action ahead of us. You can see these drivers desperately trying to warm up their tires. We haven't even mentioned that this race is going to be held under the lights here at Daytona. So I think the tire pressure and tire temperature, especially when it comes time to those out laps around the 30-minute mark, I think will definitely be a good thing to follow when it comes time for that. 77 degrees is a track temperature here, so not a lot of temperature when it comes to these tires. Definitely at the start, gang on the throttle is going to be important. Going on to the tri-oval there, trying to slam on that throttle to catch the green flag and have a great run going into turn one. So the field now is in the hands of Gregory Hovesen. He's stunned on it all the way. You can see that's a great start from him. Bit of a jump there. You can see the P2 starter there sliding in behind the Delta Sport teammates. That was a perfectly executed start from the two of them there, as they now are running in 1-2 heading into turn one. So far so clean throughout the rest of the field, and so far single file. You can see a little bit of side-by-side action has actually cooled off a little bit there, that we were following just outside the top five, but that was perfectly executed there from the Delta Sport teammates.
Yeah, it was, almost like they were in the Discord talking to each other with that start, which they probably were, right? So, so they they called it out, timed it perfectly, got a good run. So no, they're P1 and P2, and now they got Staropoli behind them. So we'll see how that works out. I think we did have a little incident, I think maybe with Cusano at going into turn one, kind of like he was off on the outside of the corner there. And so we'll see if we can see. There's the jump. So gets to start here.
Ooh, yeah, that was a little bit of bumping there.
Yeah, a little bit. That was basically somebody a little early on the brakes, I think, and Cusano just couldn't really catch it in time. So he'll be on the back foot. Probably have to come in and get the car repaired and get back out, or just try and run it. But you're probably going to be down on top speed, and it's going to be tough to stay with this pack.
Yeah, one little unique flair when it comes to this race with how long the flat-out blasts are at this track. Any sort of front-end damage that you get in these very aerosensitive GT3 cars could definitely hurt you. Feel like you're dragging a parachute. Even when you're sitting in the slipstream, you can see maybe a little bit of bump drafting there from the Delta Sport teammates going down into the tri-oval. That was incredibly close between a few of them, but we have a move here. Ooh, that was very close. More contact made. You can see Jake Luther there, a little bit of meat in that sandwich, and now he might possibly get overtaken again. Oh, even more contact there. I believe that was Simon Atwell making contact as they went through the very fast, very quick kinks that they had to negotiate before going into the first horseshoe. That was incredibly close there. A little bit of front end damage. I don't think it's going to hurt any of those drivers at all. Very light contact, all things considered, but contact nevertheless. These drivers are picking up those incident points, which is something that we have to keep in mind. There is an incident point limit when it comes to these broadcasts and these races. So these drivers really have to keep their eyes on it and keep their noses clean, because if they let that get out of hand, they're going to be in for a world of hurt. Picking up a penalty in a track like this with a very long pit lane, any sort of drive-through penalty you may incur will definitely sting quite a lot as you see all of your rivals just buzz by you on the left-hand side.
Absolutely, yeah. You can't afford to take a drive. The pit lane is so long, you can't afford to take a drive through. It's basically 45 seconds of time lost on track. It's almost like a pit stop, just to be fair, or very close to it. But one thing we didn't mention, we're talking about the being a night race, is I wouldn't think, even with these guys, I don't think pit stops may be just fuel only. But the tires are going to be able to stay lively much longer with the cooler temps. So should make for some really good racing. Less chance for any kind of errors, in the infield from just wearing the tires down.
I think that's a very good point to be made. I'm sure a lot of these drivers are really focusing on fuel saving, which could be a reason why many of them are sitting in the slipstream now and really just taking it careful. One driver that definitely wasn't taking it careful was Starpoli, who set the fastest lap of the race last time by. That was a pretty good lap from him. He's currently running in P3, a little bit farther behind. Thank you, Josh, for the graphic change. You can see 145.544 there. That was his fastest lap of the race thus far. You can see he's still pretty close to the Delta Sport teammates right in front of him, but I think he's fairly comfortable sitting in P3 right now. He's getting the massive slipstream, the massive draft, and massive fuel saving numbers that he's getting from the two cars up ahead of him. But one thing that he has to keep in mind is you can see Barrera right behind him. That's fairly close between those two, and I don't think Barrera, regardless of how much it might help him just sitting in the slipstream there and picking up the draft, I think he's a racer at heart, so I think he'll probably see a position that he could possibly gain and maybe go for the move here. If he were smart, I'm not saying that he isn't smart, but I think the smart gamesmanship move, for now at least in the very early stages of this race, would just be sitting in the slipstream, keeping your car clean and trying to save up your stuff before the second half of the stint.
Well, you don't get the nickname Dive Bomber for sitting in fourth place and fuel saving. So yeah, I think if he's got anything in the car, he's going to be trying to move forward. But so far, these four cars seem to have a little bit of a gap. Retsma's trying to catch that back up. He's right at that edge, about a 1 second gap in front. So it's going to be very difficult to make that up as long as these guys are staying in line. But I think he's doing a pretty good job of just kind of hanging on the very edge of that. If one of these guys checks up, though, then, he's right back in this. So it's just a matter of just playing that waiting game and just trying to run your pace as hard as you can go to stay in the edge of the draft for these four cars up front.
Yeah, I think the best way to describe it right now is definitely a waiting game. A lot of drivers have been taking it easy, but some have not. I think we might get some replays to see some stuff that's been going on farther down in the pack. You can see we're following Matthew Pern right now. They're running in P11. I believe this might be it's actually Cassano here. You can see in the number 99 Audi here coming into turn one. You can already see that the hood is missing there. A little bit of front end damage on that car. So I think, maybe that definitely picked up a lot more damage. Hey, we mentioned at the start of this broadcast how we were expecting someone to doink that tire barrier right there. It's something that many of us have done in the sim, and I think unfortunately Chris Cassano was the latest to be called out by a little bit of rear lock, I think, coming into this corner, or a little bit of misjudging, or maybe just I think Chris Cassano maybe just decided to break off some of his parts and try and donate them to charity or something like that. That was a very strange incident and hurting his race once again. He is in the pits, and I think he is completely out of it, probably done for the night, and decide to have a beer for the rest of tonight's race.
Yeah, that's probably not a bad call at this point. Because, you could get the car towed around, but you've got to basically tow the entire lap. So you're going to be down several laps by the time they get the car back and get it repaired. So yeah, it's probably just a good idea. I mean, he might come out because there will be other things happen. We saw that with at CTMP where guys that were way down in the order picked up 3 or 4 spots in the last couple laps from incidents. But it's a little bit harder to get incidents here than it is at CTMP.
Yeah, I do have very expansive runoffs area, but real quick, I just want to say right before I was going to mention that our producer Josh put together some awesome camera work there. Just saw Kyle Domark's character in the sim just giving Gregory Hoveson's rear bumper the death stare going through the tri-oval. I noticed that they set identical lap times last time by. I'll take a look at my live timing screen to see exactly what they did. The both of them were putting in very good lap times. Yeah, you can see, thank you very much, Josh. You can see 1:45.054 for the both of them setting the fastest lap of the race at pretty much the exact same time. I think technically, since they tied in time, I think it goes to Gregory Hoveson since he set it first. But that's something I've never seen in an iRace before. I've never seen drivers running in P1 and P2 setting exact same laps and setting the fastest lap of the race as well. That is definitely a man, I've never seen that before. I haven't been commentating iRacing events for very long, but I've never seen that in the many broadcasts I've done.
Yeah, I've never seen that during a race. Obviously, with a couple of the series that I do, we've got some big grids, and the qualifying times are very, very tight. Especially when we talked about the race that we had last night at Homestead, where the lap times were just almost identical. And you get good drafts and stuff like that, so that helps kind of tighten everything up. As we see Staropoli looking down to the inside, and Barrera saying, "Yeah, I'm going to look around on the outside."
Ooh, that was a big snap there from Barrera. There, he got on the dirty part of the track, and that could have hurt him badly.
Yeah, it was a really good catch. He did a good job just to get that car, keeping it going straight.
And I think that little snap that we're taking a look at a replay, that would have been a beautiful move if Barrera managed to pull it off there, but just gone to the dirty part of the track, snapped around on him a little bit. He was lucky to catch it, but he has fallen back into the crutches of Spencer Retzma right behind him in P5. Oh, you can see the quick hands there to keep that car going in a straight line, but you can see the very small gap that he had between himself and Retzma there. You can see Retzma has actually set the fastest lap of the race there at a 1:45.035. So he set the fastest lap a few moments ago. Then Hoveson and Domark took it there with their identical fastest laps, and then Retzma just took it last time by. So I think Retzma at this point is probably smelling blood in the water here. And I think one thing that he has to keep in mind is that the gap between right now Staropoli and Barrera right now, it's about a second separating them. It's a fairly large gap, one of the longest gaps that we have in this entire field. So I think Retzma right now may think, you know what, if Barrera is just way too slow, I may have to force the issue here and try and catch up to that pack farther up the road.
Yeah, I think my strategy would probably be is push them if you can, because you get those cars that tightly packed together, and they'll make up a lot more time than you trying to go around them and battling side by side. So I think that's the smart call. But people just as we said, they're racing, so you don't necessarily want to be just sitting behind somebody for several laps. But that's, like I said, what I would do is just try and push them and get them close to that front three, and then we can race. All 5 of us can be racing at the same time.
Well, one thing you can say for sure about all these drivers is that they are wholehearted racers. All of these drivers are some of the best in this series. Staropoli is very impressive so far in his race, still running in P3. He's pretty much been running in that position all throughout this race, and a name that I personally don't recognize from this series. I don't believe he raced at all in Season 2, hasn't run in Season 3 so far. I'll take a look at the championship standings to see if he has to fact check myself here, but I believe he's new to this series, and he's putting together a very good drive. He is. So the driver in the number 93 Porsche putting together a pretty good effort, all things considered. This is probably the least comfortable that the Delta Sport teammates have been really in their entire time running in this series that we've covered here on Apex Racing TV since the start of Season 2 back in September of 2023. Of all the broadcasts that we've done, I think it's coming up to 9 now, 9 being tonight's broadcast. I think of all of them, I can imagine Delta Sport have never felt more uncomfortable than they are right now. So I think Staropoli is really putting in a pretty impressive performance right now to really put these drivers under pressure. We'll see what happens. And we're still in the early stages of this race, just over 12 minutes in to this 45-minute affair here. There's still a lot that can happen, but right now I'm pretty impressed by the driver running in P3.
Yeah, he's doing a great job. And yeah, it's in this, and the more these 5 cars stay together during this race, the more discomfort those 2 guys in front are going to feel. And just because that once we get down to the last laps, people are starting to, as we see Barrera up to the inside, just kind of give him the shoulder. Nice Staropoli. Side by side, still bumping and banging.
That could have ended in absolute tears on multiple occasions there. That was a textbook dive bomb from Justin Dive Bomber Barrera, living up to his name there with a move coming into turn 1.
Yeah, to move to turn 1, then you could just really see, we saw the little contact at the beginning of the race through 2 and 3, and you could really just see how tight those 2 little corners are. That was just late on the brakes. Yeah, takes the inside. Staropoli with a nice crossover to come back, and then they're just side by side, and it's very, very tight through those 2 little corners.
Yeah, we're getting another look at this going into turn 1. Barrera, that was a very late send there. I don't think he really meant to do that, and that was... I got him. I don't think the damage is too bad on either of their cars, but I don't think they can afford to be and bang like they did there every single lap, because if they do, they're going to fall into the crutches of Rennsport. You can see Rennsport was trying to look for a move on Barrera heading into the first horseshoe there. But with all of that going on, the gaps have actually spread out a little bit towards the front. You can see about 2 or 3 car lengths separating Staropoli and Domark currently running in P2. And as all that was going on, Jake Luther is slowly reeling them in. We'll take a look at the live timing screen to see their laps this time by, but I think all these drivers are really falling into the crutches. Certainly Staropoli, Barrera, and Rennsport are falling into the crutches of Luther. Taking a look at the live timing screen now, and they're crossing the line just about now. I'm taking a look. Rennsport was at a 46.0. They're all pretty much in the 46 range. And then Luther was at a 45.6. So about a half a second, my apologies, quicker than Barrera last time by. So I think Luther might be smelling a little bit of blood in the water. He's still involved in his own fight. You can see a 3-car pack, my apologies, between himself, Luther, and Hall here. So this is pretty tight stuff here involving Simon Attrell, the meat in this sandwich, running in the middle in that number 12 Porsche. We kind of joke about this every single broadcast. He's always seemed to be struck by falling anvils, but right now he's putting together a decent drive up 1 spot from where he started. So right now, if he can hold on to his stuff, I think he might be in with a decent shot of getting a top 5. What do you think, Charles?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You stay up in that lead pack, and anything can happen. You see how aggressive some of the drivers are early on in this race. So yeah, anything's possible at this point, especially if you're only just 3 or 4 seconds back to the main pack. Just stay in line, get to work together, and see if you can make up the time. The battling up front is definitely helping Luther and that group move up. So you absolutely want to just kind of keep on it and work together if you can, and see if you can get back up to that group, because the more cars you can pack together, the faster they're going to be able to go down this straightaway, and they'll just end up making up more and more time on that front group.
Yeah, it's really, in this race, I think regardless of manufacturer affiliation with the cars that you're running, and regardless of team affiliation, speaking of, are Hovesen and Domark, is that some kind of connection issue for both of the drivers running in P1 and P2? No, they pitted.
Yep.
Are they already into the pits now? We might have to take a look to see if they're in pit lane. That would be a very shocking turn of things, and they are in pit lane. I thought it was some kind of quick little blank out, but they're coming into the pits supremely early, trying to run a very long second stint. So this is a little bit of a bamboozling move, I would have to say, between the 2 drivers running in the Lamborghinis. That's the only way I can describe it, because we've never really seen pit stops in these races, sure, the 20-minute mark, but them pitting on the minute 16 barrier is a little bit shocking.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting move to do an undercut at a big draft track like this. It helps that they're together, so they're obviously going to just keep working together and maximizing their race pace. But yeah, it's normally you're just basically running it till the tank's dry. and making that last pit stop as short as possible. But maybe they're figuring that with some clean air, they can just basically run the pace that they want and can keep up.
I gotta imagine they had to have this had to have been premeditated. I think from these two, I don't think they would have fueled themselves for another about 15 minutes, and they went to pit fairly early. So I think that might have been an extended stop from them just to fill up and short filled at the start of this to try and pull off that strategy. So I think that's thrown a lot of these drivers in for a loop. We're riding on board with the driver that's now leading this race, Eric Starpoli here. We're gonna see if he possibly makes the move to go into the pits. He does. So I think this is maybe this is just a little bit of a response call here from the drivers running up towards the front, or maybe this is all premeditated from these drivers and they're just assigned to flip the strategy, but I don't think that is.
I don't think so. No, I think this is just a response. I think this is just saying, okay, they came in early. We need to make sure that the most they're going to get. Barrera missed his box, had to back up, and so did who was that? Hall? I think it was. No, who was it? It was Luther. Luther was the other one. So both those two cars missed their box. So now they're going to be on the back foot. Starpoli is going to go out by himself, which is not where you want to be. And now Barrera is going to come out as well as Luther, and they're just wow. So now they've really got their work cut out for them.
Well, you can see in all of that, Starpoli, who only had 13.9 seconds stopped in his box, that was about 3 seconds quicker than the two Delta Sport drivers, and you can see what that has resulted in. That's a pretty big gap between those two. Certainly, Barrera lost out quite a lot. Well, I won't say lost out, really, about an equal time, so he really didn't lose too much time out of all that, but he's definitely very far off from the Delta Sport driver, so I think he might lose a little bit of time just not having as strong of a draft. But I think right now is looking pretty good, all things considered, for Starpoli. Still, there's a lot that can happen in this race. This is a very surprising turn of events. I think I'm just looking now. I don't believe the field, I think, at this point is split in their strategies. I think there's some drivers that are trying to stretch it out to the 30-minute mark, and others that have already come in pretty quickly. This is quite intriguing. We haven't really seen this much strategy content in these races, so it's a little bit shocking to see this.
I'm gonna go against you on this one, Ron. I think Starpoli is a sitting duck. I think he's short fueled, but I think those two cars behind, with them just basically working nose to tail, I don't think he can hold this out here. I think they're going to catch him in pretty short order. I'd say within the next 2 laps or so, they're going to be right up with him again, and they're probably just going to freight train him. And so he'll be back right where he started from in P3, because that's all they're doing now is they're just running. Like I said, they're just hooking up and running, bump drafting down the straightaways, and so you already see the gap closing.
Well, he definitely had a much shorter stop, but I think he really could afford to have a much shorter stop. He was sitting in the draft of those two throughout a vast majority of those first 15 or so minutes, and even though those Lamborghinis are quite short in their stature, they still punch a pretty big hole in the air, certainly helping tow along Starpoli throughout that very abridged first stint. So I think he might have been able to save some gas there. I think he could afford the opportunity to short fill here. I think he'll definitely have to defend for his life between now and the checkered flag, but I mean, if I'm placing money, I think this is probably the most confident I've been that Gregory Hoverson may not win a race, because for all we know, all these drivers could be playing themselves with the strategy. They could be screwing themselves over and maybe going to the half-hour mark. Could be the strategy to go for in this race. We'll just see what transpires between now and the checkered flag. But I think this is probably the most confident that I've been in saying this. I think Gregory Hoverson has a real challenger here.
Oh, no, I absolutely agree with that. It's, once they get up and around him, and they'll pass him probably before that. Probably going into before they get to turn 1. He will, he'll still be in third, and he can still sit there and save fuel. So I think the short field was probably a good call. But I think that, I think that once he gets back in P3, we saw it last night. How the third place guy is kind of in the catbird seat, and So that may play out tonight too. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, these other guys that haven't pitted yet, they're just hoping that, I'm sure they're all just hoping that we're all staying in line and just maximizing our lap times in hopes that something with these cars happen and they lose 5 or 10 seconds, and so they can take their pits and still be out in front.
Ooh, Gregory Hoveson just set a stormer of a lap time last time by. I was going to comment how Starpoli was the only driver to set a lap time below the 1:45 barrier, but actually, just as I was going to say that, Hoveson dipped into that last time by as, yeah, you can see, thank you very much, Josh, at a 1:44.895. So that's a pretty good lap time from him, the fastest of the race thus far. So I think right now, both Delta Sport drivers are definitely on a mission. Gregory Hoveson, we've seen this a lot from him in Season 2, and we've seen a lot so far in Season 3. Regardless of what stage of the race is in, whether it be towards the end of a stint, whether it be towards the beginning, or what, whether his tires are worn or what, it doesn't really matter. He has been able to put down absolute stormers of lap time, so it's really helped him out when it comes to trying to play off the strategy game and win it. But you can see some hard battling there. Up towards the front, you can see the gap is very small between the front run, well, the net front runners really in this race. They're still running just barely in the top 10. Right now, the leader is Spencer Retzma, but you can see this is close stuff here between Starpoli and Hoveson. We might see a move here coming into turn 1. Certainly, this would be his best opportunity to do it. Maybe we might see Gregory Hoveson abandon his teammate. We could see him try and pay the team game. Oh, there's a little bit of bumping there, and he's spinning off the track. There's a little bit of bump drifting going horribly, horribly wrong there for the drivers that were running up towards the net front of the field. And it all started where Gregory Hoveson came in an ill-advised bump to Starpoli. It sent him into the barriers. I think, is there a little bit of crab action from that Porsche? I think there might be some possible suspension damage on that Porsche of Starpoli. Wow, that was quite dramatic there.
Yeah, that was... we get another group, Josh, with a replay here. You see the bump just as yeah, he slapped the wall pretty hard. It was a glancing blow, so I don't know if it's necessarily. It wouldn't surprise me if there was suspension damage for sure. Yeah, but it's just one of those that, at a certain point you just can't bump draft anymore. So, and that's very close to him crossing over and getting a black flag for cutting the track.
Well, that was just, you gotta feel so bad because that was looking to be a fantastic battle, and I think if Starpoli managed to, if that accident didn't happen, I'm sure Starpoli definitely would have been a driver finishing on the podium, but sadly for him, it just wasn't meant to be as he's dropped down like a rock throughout this field, and it's going to be a really tough battle for him to try and claw up into that front running position. You can see the drivers that were running ahead of them that were on the different strategies staying out a little bit longer, staying out to about the halfway mark, pitting here on the minute 25 mark. You can see Alvis, De Hinza, and Buenaventura all in pit lane right now, taking some decent time in the pits. You can see Alvis, who we're following there, at a 17.8 second stop there. So all of them have now pitted, and the order has shuffled up. Ooh, Starpoli in, yeah. Yep. I think these drivers do have the benefit of a faster pair, so I don't think it's going to hurt him too bad. Well, I say he's not going to be stuck in the pits for about 2,000 years trying to repair any sort of suspension damage that he may have, but he's still, this is painful from Starpoli's perspective. Absolutely painful. It's devastating, you could say, and it's such a shame because that was looking to be a fantastic battle, and sadly it ended in absolute tears.
Yeah, it did, and I think, I'm just sitting here looking at it, he's still in the pit, so maybe he didn't have his pit stop set for that second time, and he's getting a full service. Yeah, it's kind of what it looks like. So just very sad. It's just, it was, he was obviously running a great race for his first time out here. And, to have that kind of damage is just, it's terrible. So it's, so is he, he's back out on track, or is he out of the race?
I believe he is out. He has left the session. So can't really blame the guy. I'm sure he's a little bit ticked off with his competitors, but I think if he is listening to this broadcast, he gets our Star Award, because that was probably one of the most impressive debuts that I've seen in quite some time, and he was putting on a pretty good showing and could be involved in the podium fight, but it just wasn't meant to be. Throughout all of that, though, the drivers that were running in the top 4 have now come into the pits. There was Spencer Retzma, who was in the lead of the race, is now going to drop down the order just a little bit. I believe he'll be running in a net P4. I believe Barrera will be able to get by Retzma. We'll see. Oh, that was a very interesting line there from Simon Admiral, running all the way into the barriers there, so that's a little bit of an interesting call. But actually, I believe Retzma has jumped ahead of Barrera there, so he has now inherited the final podium position. That's a pretty well executed strategy for the driver running in the Ferrari, the only Ferrari in this field. Was a little bit of a surprise. When we saw season 2, when the Ferrari was quite new to the service, we were seeing many drivers running it, but it was also it was a quick car used by a lot of drivers, but it was also fairly edgy. But Spencer Retzma is the only driver running in that Ferrari, but he's running pretty good right now. Right now, it's an Italian manufacturer, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, absolutely, fantastic job. Yeah, I think we're seeing the same things. Just talking with my teammates, the Audi being its first season, everybody was in love with it, and then I think iRacing's kind of made some adjustments to the BOP for the car, and it's not quite as good as it was. So this one of those things that you have to deal with, and I think these guys get car changes free anyway. So even if you were in the Audi, if you wanted to switch, you could jump to the Porsche or the Lamborghini with no issues. So yeah, but he's obviously doing a great job to jump Barrera from staying out a long time versus the Barrera undercut, and even his pit stop was actually 3 seconds longer than Barrera. So he did a great job.
Yeah, was just able to put in those good laps, running up towards the front, set the fastest lap of the race quite early on. Obviously, that gap and that honor has gone to other drivers in the later stages of this race, but I think right now, this battle for the final podium position is probably going to be the main one that we keep our eyes on, unless we see some kind of team orders develop between the two Delta Sport drivers of Gregory Hoverson and Kyle Domark. It looks fairly set in stone that Gregory Hoverson is possibly going to take his 3rd win of the season, make it 3 for 3 to kick this year off and really stake his claim on a 2nd championship in a row. We'll just see how things develop. I'll ask you this, Charles. Do you think this P3 battle is going to be the main one that we have to follow between now and the checkered flag, or do you think there's another one that we have to keep our eyes on?
Well, I'm sitting here looking. Yeah, this one's going to be pretty significant because I don't think Barrera is going to, once he gets locked in, I think he's going to want to try and battle for P3. But that group of 4 cars that are between P5 and P8 that are basically within about 2 seconds of each other, I think that's going to be another battle also. Obviously, Luther's at the back of that. He was pretty much leading the front of that group before the pit stops, and I think he'll want to stake his claim of kind of the best of that group before it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think there's still plenty to be decided when it comes to this battle. I'm sure neither of these drivers are going to take it fairly easy. Retzma has always been running pretty decent when it comes to these races, always running in the top 10 and even running in the top 5 from time to time, but I can't remember the last time he scored a podium. It definitely hasn't been this season so far. He's been running good as usual, but it just hasn't been any sort of podium pace. But right now, as the gates have opened up after the Starpoli incident there, I think right now he's looking in a pretty good spot. But you can see Barrera very squirrely on the brakes. I think he might have outbroked himself quite badly there if Retzma's car was just about 5 feet farther back. I think we would have seen P3 and P4 wreck out of this race. But that was Barrera once again going pretty hard on the brakes. I gotta wonder if he's struggling with that BMW. The BMW is an absolute unit of a race car. It was a little bit of a meme when this car was first introduced, really in the real life racing world, how it was a massive race car. But I can imagine just the massive trying to get that thing slowed up from excess of over 150 miles an hour going into turn 1. I can imagine that's why he's been struggling in that BMW all race.
Yeah, I think that you're right. Obviously, that's a very nose heavy car, and so a hard braking zone is probably not going to be good because it really lightens the rear up, and you can kind of see with those with that downhill left hand turn into turn 1. where you're basically at max speed. I mean, these cars are at, I think, the max for the GT class. So this is one of the, obviously this, and there's a couple other tracks on the service that where they'll hit top speed, and going into turn one is one of those places. So yeah, it's a bit of work to get that BMW slowed down, because it is quite a large and heavy car. Like I said, all the weight's on the front, so you grind that front splitter into the ground, and then the rear end just wants to get real loose on you.
Well, here we go. You can see Barrera closing. He's going to try and go for a move going around the outside going into turn one. This is going to be a bit bold if he can manage to make it stick. He tried to go for a very similar move earlier on in this race, but it doesn't go his way this time by. I think Rennsport got a little bit squirrely exiting that corner, but I don't think it's going to help him a little bit. You can see it looked like Barrera was possibly going to try and sneak it going around the outside, going into the first horseshoe there, but just wasn't close enough. I think Barrera might be feeling a little bit racy at this stage. I can imagine it's going to be pretty racy between these two, but it was also pretty racy farther behind. I believe we have some action here and a possible replay of some action that was going on right towards the tail end of the top five. This is between Luther here, who are following in the number 19 Porsche here, going side by side into turn one, and a little bit of contact possibly. Yep, there you go. A little bit of contact, argy-bargy action heading into turn one, and it spins him around a little bit. I think, ooh boy. That was very close. I believe that was centered to Hinza there in the second BMW in this field. Only two BMWs running in this race. That was pretty close there. That could have ended in absolute tears for all of them if there was an unsafe rejoin. But thankfully for them, it hasn't really resulted in that. But Hall right now is currently running in P13. I just noticed that. Not a good race for him. We're following Spencer Retsma here. This was the fight going on between Barrera and himself going into the horseshoe. Ooh, outbroke himself quite a lot there. Went into the grass. A little bit of rally action there on the outside, and he loses that final podium position. So right as I was going to say that Barrera was feeling a little bit slow and sluggish from my perspective, he actually gains that podium spot.
Yeah, it was just a mistake by Retsma, just a little too deep on the brakes, and had to get it in the grass and bring it back around, and gives Barrera the spot. But he's still within that kind of that magical 1 second. So as long as he's there, as he just inches way closer back up to it. I don't think that battle's quite done yet. So, but it's tough to see Luther. I mean, he was obviously looking to get around that. Looking to get around that group and try and get back up in the top five, but just minor mistake cost a lot of time.
I think we're getting another replay here going into the second horseshoe there. Spencer Retsma just outbroke himself quite a lot there. There's such a very thin, just razors thin margin of error when it comes to these GT3 cars. We kind of expected it coming into this race. These drivers have so much experience running this track, and they still try and push it because they're racers and they want to get the most amount of time they can out of their lap time. So unfortunately there for Spencer Retsma, it hurt him a little bit, but I think we're getting another replay to see the incident that happened there involving Jake Luther a few laps ago. This is once again going into the first corner. I believe, is this a replay of what we saw before, or is this another incident?
Yeah.
Ooh, it's a different one, and a little bit of sparks flying there, and I think, our producer Josh is saying that he clipped the wall there, so I think that could be the reason why the sparks were flying a bit there. Just a slight little clip there, but it's not really going to hurt him too badly. Currently running a no man's land, about 5 seconds separating himself and Dehinza between P9 and P10, and then quite a long way between himself and Buenaventura there in P10 and P11.
Yeah, just like I said, you make one mistake and just out of rhythm, and just like I said, just push a little too hard, maybe clips a tire barrier. These guys, as we see Domart with a little blink there, I think the next time we'll have to worry about these guys is probably on that last lap. Because my guess is team orders are, if you can pass me, just don't wreck me. So they'll give I'm sure they'll give Denmark a chance to try to take the win, but it seems to be one of those little strategy games that to play there at the end of the race. But we still got this battle here with Attrell, Piran, and Hendricks from P5 to C7, and the replay here from Josh. And we got Attrell coming in. He's running sixth. And I think Hendricks just says, I'm going to move out of your way. And yep, so it looks like Hendricks said, I'm going to go back here and I'm just going to ride behind you guys for a few laps. So maybe that was because he knows he's going to need to save fuel, or maybe he's just more comfortable riding behind and he'll try and make moves later.
Well, I think with how strong the slipstream is at this track, I gotta imagine running at the tail end of a train is probably a little bit beneficial when it comes to this race. Sammy Hendricks, off the back of a podium finish 2 weeks ago at Hockenheim, currently running in P7. So not the best race for him in the world in comparison, but still a pretty good race for him regardless. But getting back to the battle, up towards the front, really talking about the discussions, we see Pern trying to get a move done here on Attrell. I think Attrell is just trying to...
slow down.
Ooh, slow down, yeah, slow down. That could be the reason why he's weaving a little bit, trying to keep his tires clean and keep him warm there, but just a little bit. I'm surprised we didn't mention that so far in this race. We didn't really beat that dead horse of picking up a slowdown coming through the chicane and just having that absolutely wreck your chances. Maybe we'll see that towards the end of this race. We might see some battles get derailed because of the slowdown.
It has happened. Oh, Attrell will spin.
And into the wall as well. Be careful on the rejoin here. Next car is Alvis, who's catching up to him now. And hopefully Dehinza coming up on the road. This is going to be painful for him just being stopped on the track. Ooh, gonna be close there. Oh my God, that might have been inches separating those two. I think neither of them have clean pants after that very close call. Exiting turn 2 there for Simon Attrell. That's a very tough turn of things. He was running in a great position, picked up that slowdown, then spins coming through turn 1. That is a very tough thing, very tough turn of luck for the Canadian.
Yeah, especially after getting that slowdown, it's and then just to make a mistake, and it's that's always what I've thought about the Audi. Is that I always told people, I said it's a really great car. It's really good with its lateral movement, but for whatever reason, always wants to try and kill you at least one time during the race. I don't know why that is, but we talked about the slowdown that the Attrell got, and that might have been the reason Hendricks went to the back as well, and didn't think about that because we haven't seen it yet. But that might have been the same reason he was up high and letting those guys go by us. He was trying to work that slowdown off also.
Yeah, that could very much explain it. I think that could be the reason why the fight got involved in there. Meanwhile, feeling a little bit racy these two are. I don't think we'll see any hard battling that could result in a form of contact, because with the massive gap between Domark and Barrera, you can see that gap now. Barrera right now about 8.5 seconds behind Hovesen in P1. I think the only reason we might see some sort of shuffle for position between Hovesen and Domark could be team orders, which wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world if I'm being brutally honest. Kyle Domark ended up P2 in the championship in Season 2, just behind his teammate, took that win under team order circumstances at the last race of the season at Watkins Glen. So maybe we could see something like that this time again. I think Domark, if I'm not mistaken, he finished second at the first race of the season at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, then didn't show up. He wasn't in the field at the race at Hockenheim Ring, so he has cratered his position, I believe. I'll take a look at the championship results. If you want to take a look at the championship standings, you actually head on over to s1racing.com to take a look at that. But right now, Kyle Domark is running P7 in the championship standings right now. So I think as we see Justin Hall exiting the pits, who's going to have a very tough race, has had a tough race so far, and is going to have a tough turn of things when it comes to his championship running position. Was running in the was running in P2 entering this race. I think his championship result will crater massively after a very tough race here tonight. But I gotta imagine, unless there's some sort of championship aspirations when it comes to Kyle Domark trying to gain his position and move up a little bit farther in the championship point standings, I think these two will stay line astern between now and the checkered flag.
Yeah, I mean, once again, the order could be, hey, as long as we don't hit each other, we're fine. If you want to try and make a move at the end of the race to pass me, I'm sure they're sure that'd be fine. And yeah, I don't know that that Hovesen is necessarily going to move over, because obviously with Domark running P2, it's going to get a nice handful of points for this race, especially with Hall struggling tonight. So he will move several spots back up in the order in the championship. So yeah, it's you never know. It just depends on how they want to play it. But they could play it and say, hey, you know what, we've done well together. Let's just finish like this. Or they could say, all right, last lap, gloves are off. Do what you think you can do, and we'll see how we end up at the end. As long as we're not both up against the wall somewhere, I think we're okay.
I don't know, maybe I'd be like a really paranoid and really bad team owner, but I think the gloves off mentality when you have a pretty much assured 1-2 could probably result in a bumpers off finish for both of your cars. So I think maybe if it were me and I was running Delta Sport, which obviously I'm not, I think they'd be at a loss if they hired me. They'd probably screw themselves over when it comes to the team operations day to day. But I think if it were me in charge, I would probably just say, hey, look, you two, keep it cool. Don't try and do any stupid crap with each other. You're running in a great position right now. I believe they're going to be taking the 2 to go this time by, if not actually the white. We'll take a look at the other. Actually, no, I believe they will be taking 2 to go this time by. You can see the closing there of Kyle Domark. A little bit of bump drafting here coming into the tri-oval there. So I think unless we see some sort of team orders here, I can imagine these two are going to stay line astern. But getting back to the possibility of being a team owner, I think maybe if I was a team owner, I would try and shuffle those two just for the benefit in the championship. But these two aren't teammates here. Sammy Hendricks, who we're following, trying to get the move done here on Matthew Pern, going around the outside of turn 1. This is going to be bold. I think they nearly made contact heading into the corner just before they went onto the brakes there. But Sammy Hendricks still running in P6 there. It's going to be pretty close between these two, between now and the checkered flag, trying to battle for that last top 5 spot. This is going to be, I think this might be the closest battle that we have to watch. I think everything else has more or less fizzled out. The gap between Barrera and Retsma has increased to about a second, a little bit less than that now, actually, but still fairly large, all things considered, between those two. So I think this might be the battle to keep our eyes on.
Yeah, I think that you may be right. And I will say, speaking as a team owner, I have had that situation where we had our a league race where we had our 3 drivers that were involved were running first, second, and third, and I watched the second place driver absolutely send a guy at Watkins Glen and ended his race, and so now we're down to 2 cars. So yeah, I kind of get it. And Thomas will be mad at me because I've said this on the air to remind him of it, but that's fine. He needs to be reminded every day. So yeah, it's, it would, if they stay like this, that's fine too. I think either one of them will be happy, or both will be happy. But if they decide they want to have a little race at the end of it, then I mean, as like I said, as long as as long as you follow rule number 1, which is don't hit your teammate, then I think everything's good. As we get that, should be the white flag right like there.
Ooh, I think this might be it here. You can see Domark trying to get the move done around the outside, just pulled out a little bit, maybe just trying to get the move done, or just maybe pulling out to try and prevent any sort of contact in the braking zone there. Or you can see this is a very controversial move from Sammy Hendricks, trying to get the move done there on Pern heading into the turn 1 section there through the tri-oval. He ran on the apron. I'm not sure if that's really allowed. I'm not sure if he picked up a slowdown. I don't think he will. I don't think he did, as he's not really dropping back in pace. I know from my time officiating races at this track, if anyone runs on that apron when it comes time for qualifying, we usually shun that. But still, it's some hard racing between these two, still going side by side. Going into the kink, it's going to be a battle to see who backs out of it. I don't think either of them will. Sammy Hendricks trying to hold on to that last P5 spot.
Yeah, it's a tight battle. And don't count out that battle in P3 and 4. It looks like it was heating up too. So let's have to keep an eye on that as well. But yeah, these guys are going to battle all the way to the checker flag for sure.
Ooh, this is going to be really tough between these two. I gotta imagine someone might try and go for a ridiculous send coming into the chicane. It looked like, ooh, wow, I think both of them were probably running on the apron right before we caught up to them, but you can see it's pretty close between the Delta Sport teammates. Gregory Hoverson has dominated this series ever since the start of the broadcast here on Apex Racing TV. They're running up against a wall. We might see some team orders trickery here in the late stages of the race. It could be some kind of maneuvering for the championship, or it could be another Gregory Hoverson win. He's pulling to the infield. This might be a little bit of showmanship from the two of them. Yeah, they're going to be running on the apron, finishing line astern a little bit side by side, coming to the checkered flag. That was pretty close between those two, but it's going to be Gregory Hoverson taking the win here in tonight's race. Justin Barrera is going to be finishing in a fairly firm P3 there. I think a lot of these drivers are running on the apron to waste their off tracks towards the end of it and try and get the most amount of pace they can, but you can see side by side here between the two Audis, that's going to be Sammy Hendricks finishing in P6. P6, and it's going to be Pern finishing in P5, pulling it just barely over his adversary there right towards the finish. That was a photo finish of the ages there. That was some fantastic stuff there for the two drivers battling for that final P5 position.
Yeah, just a great race. It's just, that had potential to be, really good six plus car battle at the start, but just a couple of mistakes by some of the drivers, and we end up with a nice Delta Sport 1-2 there at the end.
I mean, we come to expect Delta Sport 1-2s, but not like that. I think that's probably the closest they've been throughout this entire series. That was pretty close. You can see Gregory Hoverson stopped there on track. I think he might have pandered doing some donuts, but I think I think some of these drivers might be running out of fuel. That took that very early stop, so I think that could be the reason why they're stopping on track at very vicarious circumstances. That was kind of like a weird game of bowling. I was expecting someone to just come through and completely slam into your winner from tonight. That would not be the way to end his night of racing action from this series. I believe pretty much everyone has crossed the checkered flag, has crossed the finish line to take the checkered flag at the stage. We're following Barrera running in P3, took the checkered flag in P3. That was a pretty good drive from him, his first podium. I think that will help him quite a lot in the championship standings. He was just about 5 points between. It was about 5 points separating him and Justin Hall entering tonight's race. But with that P3 run and with Hall finishing quite a long way farther behind, I think that'll definitely help him out in that small little fight there for P2, which with how dominant Gregory Hoverson has been throughout this series. He's now won 8 of the 9 broadcasts here on Apex Racing TV. It wouldn't be too shocking if the battle for P2 is the one that we have to keep our eyes on. This was a battle for P5, coming to the checkered flag. Pern pulling to the outside there, nearly making contact with his adversary there, just getting the side draft, getting the slipstream, and getting the move done there in the dying stages of this race. That was a brilliant finish between those two, and it shows that in this series, whether they're running in the top 5 or the top 10 or even the top 15 for that matter, all these drivers are battling as hard as they can to claw for every position. And it's beautiful to see as a broadcaster.
Yeah, absolutely. Every point matters, so you want to get the best result possible as we're watching the battles to the finish line by all this group. Wow, 2 wide into the bus stop. That's brave. But nicely done. It was clean by both drivers, and no contact. It was nicely done.
That was pretty close going into the chicane. I'm surprised they didn't make any sort of contact. We're riding on board with Luther. This was a very bold move. You don't expect the shallow entry heading into the chicane. I'm very shocked they didn't make contact. Certainly DeHinza realized that that was a losing proposition entering that corner side by side, and he decided to back off, and I can't really blame the guy for doing so. But that was hard battling all throughout the field. That was beautiful to watch.
Yeah, and I mean, DeHinza did everything he could. He basically pinched him as close to the inside to the grass or the inside of the white line as he could, just to try and make it that much more difficult. But Luther was able to get through and cleanly, so nice job.
And I believe with all that being said, we can take a look at the results from tonight's racing action here from round 3, the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series Season 3 here, and we are now officially halfway through the season. I can't believe it myself. Gregory Hoverson taking his 3rd win on the year, staking his claim on a 2nd series championship. He takes the win here tonight, just barely over his teammate Kyle Domark in P2. The gap between those two at the end of it, 0.064 of a second. That's quite a long ways between Domark and Justin Barrera, who rounds out your podium in P3, 10 seconds back, and then quite a short distance between himself and Retsma there between P3 and P4, as Matthew Pern rounding out your top 5 with that nice photo finish between himself and Sammy Hendricks. Those two drivers finish in P5 and P6. That's Bradley Elvis having a fairly quiet race, all things considered. He finishes quite a long ways back there in P7. Jake Luther finishes this race in P8 after that move there on Santander DeHinza there going into the chicane. Then Simon Attrell with a very tough turn of things in the later stages of this race rounds at your top 10.
Yeah, so P11 was Mitch Buenaventura. Had a very quiet race, but managed to just kind of get in there and did finish at least with some company around him. Shane Brown in 12th. Justin Hall had a bad day at the office, 7 laps down at 13th. Eric Staropoli, who obviously had great pace early, and just that incident in turn one with Hoverson just obviously ruined his day. He finished 14th, 12 laps down, and then Chris Cusano with the early damage at the beginning of the race finishes 15th.
Well, I think even though Chris Cusano finished last in this race, I think he definitely gets our, we don't really have an award for this, but I think we have to make an award for the best mullet in the driver photo that these drivers submit on SDK Gaming, so we appreciate that. SDK Gaming, all the graphics that you've seen, all the fancy graphics that our producer Josh has worked all throughout tonight's broadcast, that is the cool little stuff that you can see throughout this broadcast. But if you're in the mood for some cool racing, Apex Racing TV is a home of it. You can see we're now taking a look at the slow motion of this dramatic moment in the midsection of this race that ended the chances. Four-star Polly, who is putting together a great drive. Fingers crossed that we see him at the next race of the season at Suzuka. Speaking of which, if you'd like to tune in, that'll be on January the 24th at the same time here on Apex Racing TV. We'll be running at Suzuka for the first time in series history, so that's going to be pretty exciting to watch. All things considered, I think that'll be a fairly dramatic race. I think we might see some more incidents throughout that as well. We might see some drivers making more mistakes at that very tight, twisty, and technical track there in Japan. So Charles, what do you think Suzuka is going to be like in 2 weeks' time?
I think you're exactly right. Suzuka is a fantastic track, but it is a very, very technical track. These cars, every car has its pluses and minuses, and Suzuka is one of those tracks that will find every minus that your car has and test you as a driver. So it should be a fantastic race, though. Looking forward to it. I love watching cars, and I love driving the track as well. It's one of those that it's a kind of a, it's always a lot of hard work, but it's always a great, if you get a good result out of a race there, you feel like you've done something.
Yeah, it's definitely going to take a lot of guts and skill to get a good result out of these GT3 cars there at Suzuka. That'll be a pretty good race, so if you'd like to stay up to date from the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series, you can hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to get notified of everything we have coming up here on Apex. I believe coming up in a few days' time, we're also going to have the highlight reel, which I've heard some discussion, the thumbnail image for that highlight reel coming up here on Apex in a few days' time. You can see the beautiful fireworks there right as the move was put there from Jake Luther. That was a nice little shot there. The fireworks going off right as he got that move done. But getting back to what I was going to say, if you're in the mood for racing here on Apex Racing TV, the S1 Series is the place. We got that nice moment with some aerial acrobatics that happened at Canadian Tire to kick the season off. That'll be the main highlight in that race, and if you'd like to see some more highlights here on Apex Racing TV, you can stay tuned and see some of the stuff we have coming up here. We have a fairly packed schedule this week, so tonight was the only broadcast that we had here on Apex, but when it comes time for tomorrow, we've got the BRSCC Winter Esports Series. That'll be their 7th, 8th, and 9th rounds of their Mazda Winter Cup Series there at Donington Park. That's going to be a pretty good race. Got the privilege to cover their races at Silverstone there at the start of the season, and it was glorious racing all throughout, so I can imagine another glorious British track, Donington Park. It'll put on some good racing there as well. If you're in the mood for some prototype racing, you can tune into the ARL Prototype Championship. Their second round of their season 7 will actually be here on Apex tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. I'm not sure what that is Pacific. I'm going to go out on a limb and say 12 p.m. Pacific. I might be wrong on that. Actually, I think I'm right. My math skills are getting a little bit better, so if you'd like to tune into either of those broadcasts, they start around the same time here tomorrow. That's some pretty good racing. The ARL Prototype Championship will be running at Watkins Glen. That's going to be a pretty good race there. Another series that's running at Watkins Glen is the ARL GT3 Trophy, so if you're in the mood for even more GT3 action with some of the sim racing's finest here on Apex Racing TV, you can catch that on Friday here at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you're in the mood for some radical racing, I might be a little bit biased having done that series for about a year. You can tune into that race coming up at Tsukuba. That's going to be a pretty good race, a nice little short track, 28 laps that the drivers of the Radical Esports Cup will have to manage there here on Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, and that will be 1 p.m. Pacific. So thankfully, my producer Josh, who is on the West Coast, hasn't scolded me about the time zones being wrong, so I think I got that right. So I'm going to give myself some credit that I managed to get that all correct. And we also have all sorts of action here on Apex Racing TV. So if you want to keep up to date, you know what to do. If you've used YouTube for about 5 minutes, you know to hit the subscribe bell and do all of that stuff to get notified whenever you miss a thing, which you do not want to here on Apex Racing TV. Well, I think that just about does it here tonight. We've officially reached the halfway mark of this season, but we have still much more to come from the series in the second half. We've got a championship to be decided, some other great races to have. We'll be running at Suzuka next time out, and some more great races that we'll have between now and the season closer at Bathurst. So we have a pretty damn good schedule as far as I'm concerned for the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series, but the next time we'll see you will be on January 24th, same time, same place with the same racing action. This broadcast wouldn't have been nearly as good if it weren't for our awesome producer Josh Wilkie working all the cameras, and our colleague Charles Bichelle joining me in the virtual commentary booth. We've still got plenty of blanks to fill, many laps to be turned, and 3 more races to run this season. Fingers crossed that you all tune in for the second half of the 3rd season from the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series, and also stick around for all the other broadcasts we have here on Apex Racing TV. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and Josh Wilkie working all the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your night, and I need to finish up my glass of water.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.